Presentation. Title card, The Life of a BA #BA Life, Robert.Merrill at wisc.edu, a video feed of classroom in upper right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session, The Life of a BA with Robert Merrill. We'll have some time at the end of Q&A, so if you are joining us virtually, hello. Please place your questions in the chat and I'll read them to our presenters. If you're joining us in person, please use the microphone so virtual attendees can hear you. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Robert. A project sponsor once told him, "I didn't know people like you existed, and even if I did, I wouldn't have known how to find you." Such is the life of a BA. Robert is a business systems analyst 3, institutional in the Do-It portfolio and project management office, out of which he supports project sponsors and teams with Do-It and CampusWise. He is retiring in February. So thank you so much for speaking with us today and sharing all of your insights. So I'd like to turn over the time to you.
Oh, thanks. Is the sound okay in the back? Okay, good. My name's Robert, and thank you for choosing to come here and hear some stories and some perspectives, and I hope is practical theory. I'm a big believer in understanding the principles of the thing. How many of you, I had an icebreaker question, how many of you in here have to know why when you're given a project assignment or just a procedure? Okay. You're probably, one of the things about business analysts, which is what BA stands for, is that nobody really knows who we are, what we do. You can tell from the name of a project manager what they do. But what does a business analyst do? I've had people tell me they think I do corporate valuations for mergers and acquisitions or something. So that's not it. So what I usually tell people is that I work for the IT department at the university and I'm a social worker, because that's how it feels like a lot of the times. But I'm also a map maker and a connector, and kind of this, well, what is it we do? It's probably easier to give you examples. But if you like to know why, how many of you are people managers or get involved with projects, but you're not project managers? Okay, that's probably a lot of people. And in a way, that was the target audience, because there aren't that many BAs. But my target audience is really people who do this work. They maybe don't even know that they're doing it, and give you a few ideas is probably the best way to put it, that'll help you understand and do it a little bit better. I never served in the military. I'm sort of a practical pacifist. I know enough history to know that wars hardly ever work out the way people who started them wanted them to. But one of my favorite movies of all time is Patton with George C. Scott from 1970. And there's a scene early on where he's been taken over, he's given command of an Army Corps, and he shows up to do an inspection. He shows up early, nobody knows he's coming. And he's just going through the place. I mean, he's like firing people and putting people on report for this and that and the other. He turns the corner, him and his 2 aides, and there's a soldier or GI laying on the floor sleeping. And you go, oh man, this is gonna be horrible. And one of the adjutants kicks him, "What are you doing down there, son?" And he stands up and salutes and says, "I was trying to get some sleep, sir." And Patton says, "Well, lie back down. You're the only person in this headquarters knows what he's trying to do." And ever since then, in the middle of these projects, they're big and they're complicated, and there's all the people and all the moving parts and all the technology and all the reports and all the things. What are we trying to do? So I do that with everything, and I'm the person who has to know why. My father said when I was 2, I was the best justification for infanticide the world had yet seen. He literally said that. So, I ask why, and I'm a pain.
Slide.
And I found my calling, because that's kind of the job of a BA. So what I'm going to show you is a couple of what I would call moves, ways to navigate around in mind space, because the metaphors I'm going to use are these moves. I'm going to use the metaphor of a map, and we actually have many of them, but we all have maps in our heads of reality, right? And we're constantly interpreting everything that we see. So we have a map in our mind about our projects, and this is what success looks like, and this is how a good project looks when it's running well, and this is what a bad project looks like when it's going badly. And these maps are based on everything we've heard in our life and experienced up to that point. And it's this huge space, right? I mean, there's all the stakeholders. I have one project I'm on. My stakeholder list has now passed 300 people. All these people that I've met over the course. So we're trying, how do we navigate around in that? So I'm going to give you three patterns. Well, two patterns for moving around, and then a third pattern, which is more like something you see than something you can really do, but you can help it along, and that's emergence. So one of the roles of a BA, social worker, but also map maker. And with map maker, there's also a bit of exploring. And if you're going to go exploring, you kind of have to know how to, again, find your way around in space.
Slide.
So here's the first pattern, up and to the left, I call it. And every time I see those chevrons, and this is where I can tell I'm not a project manager, never wanted to be, could never. Every time I see those, I kind of shudder a little because they're a model of a project. And according to that model, it moves inexorably in lockstep from one phase to the next, and they don't really do that. But they're a map of reality. So let's practice a little bit with up and to the left. It implies direction. Up is detail of thinking. Left, right is time. And that's like a Western convention. We read left to right, time runs left to right. So going to the left is about backing up.
Drawing.
So when you came in, you probably saw I've been using this for an avatar now for about 3 months, 2 or 3 months. And very common business analysis request is go map current state. So I could go map current state and I could describe that screen on that picture on the left in great detail. But if you go to the left, so what was before that? And what was before that? And the one on the left, I had that one for 3 or 4 years. I kind of patterned it after Tom Jordan's frog. And I saw that, if you know Tom Jordan, you know the frog. I like that. That's kind of memorable. I see that, I immediately think of Tom. I like that. So it was like that for a long time. And then in August, it acquired, I put the orange on it. And then in October, I put the green background in it. Okay, that's a little better. We know it has some history. But the thing that ties it all together is you ask why. Well, I was going along. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible is Elijah and the Ravens, so I picked it. But then, in March of 2024, I learned about Taylor Swift, and I fall hard. So the album release is in August, and I found out that the theme color was orange, so he got the orange sleeve. And then when the album dropped, and I was already thinking about this talk because I use the hashtag BA Life all the time whenever somebody does something that's very BA-like. You know, usually somebody who's not and they don't know, and I just, well, that was BA Life, and here's what that means. So when the title came out, I was like, well, this is the life of a BA. Of course I'm going to give this talk. So it got the glitter orange and the green. And now there's a story that ties it all together, and it's much easier to remember. And you can probably tell what the future is going to be, or have a little bit of an idea. It's no longer just trying to figure out the detail. You got the story. So you got 2 levels.
Metaphors for conversational altitude.
And we're used to levels in thinking. It's a concept I hear people use fairly often, actually. Give me the 30,000 foot view, and we all know what that means. It's like less detail. But what we kind of don't do sometimes is we don't know how to move up and down in the conversation or in our own thinking. Well, it's time to go up a little. It's time to go down a little. We tend to always be down and to the right. You know, the strategists were worked out by the directors and the CIO and everything, and now we're going to go down and to the right. And it's all been broken down and given to us, and we're working into the details. Well, sometimes when those details get broken down, we lose the essence of the why. And we can find ourselves totally adrift in just a sea of details, and you got to go back up and to the left. Okay, how did we get here? What were we trying to do again? Remember Patton's sleeping soldier? Well, you know what you're trying to do. So the middle one is about requirements, and you can talk about sea level, you can talk about clouds, you can talk about clams. You don't always have to go down. You can go back up. Sometimes you want to go down into clam world because you're planning a project and there's some technical detail down in clam world that's going to triple the amount of work this is going to take. And you wouldn't have known that until you dove down there and kind of poked around in the clams. But now you come back out. So you can control your level. You can control time to the left, and you can control your level up and down. So here's how that plays out in project world.
Up and to the left in the project lifecycle. A green arrow that points up and to the left.
Usually, again, I got to call those phases. If you wanted to be PMBOK, you could say it's, initiation and planning. We're in planning, and BA comes along and up and to the left. Okay, I'm new here. I never get invited in at the beginning. By the time I come in, they call what I do pre-planning, which I think is kind of interesting. It kind of shows the center of the PM world. No, that's like my whole career is, the third career is pre-planning. So it's initiation, at least call it that. But backing up, and if I'm new on the team, I wasn't in those conversations, I don't know how we got where we are. I may have a paper deliverable, a charter or a document or something, but that's sort of like having just the picture of the green. I don't have the story. And if I don't have the story, I don't really know how all this stuff fits together. So just for myself, I have to go up and to the left to figure out how did this whole thing get started? Why are we here and not over there? Were there other places we'd be going because there are other directions we could have gone? Sometimes there's a lot of insight there. Even if everything is exactly in the best place, you have a lot of insight if you can start understanding, what did we consider? What were the other options? You don't have to spend a lot of time there. And it will upset people because most people have this, we got to go forward all the time. No, sometimes the quickest way forward is to go back and up and to the left, quick, and then back down.
Expand then contract.
Here's the second pattern. Expand and contract. I learned this one. I'd been using this one for years. I think I first learned it in a workshop at Software Development West in like 2002 or 2003, but I didn't have a name for it. And then I took Luma Design Thinking, and they had a name for it. It was called Expand and Contract. And they actually drew it as you expand and contract twice. You expand and contract, you expand on the problem, and then you contract. So let's really make sure we got the whole problem. Expand, expand, expand. And there's a natural tendency, I think, of people wanting to scope things down. They always want to go in the same direction. Let's focus, let's focus, let's focus. Focus is vital. You just swirl if you don't have focus. But focus too soon can put blinders on you. So it's expand, look around, and then contract. And then the way they taught it in Luma, and I thought there was a great insight here, is when you get into the solution, you do the same thing. Okay, now we're ready to implement whatever it is we're going to do. Let's broaden that out again. Do we really have the scope that this thing wants to be and not just the scope that we're defining? Well, it's got connections. We start expanding and we realize it's got connections over there, and the data come from over there, and the users are over there. And all of a sudden we're spanning the org chart, and we realize, oh my, this thing's got tentacles. And we could say, well, those are out of scope, but they really are logically. They're going to come back in anyway. But at least then if we're focusing, we can decide where and how we're going to focus.
The bridge.
And I saw that picture, and nerd that I am, I immediately thought of this. Does anybody know what that is? It's the train trestle, but it's a bridge in Scotland. It's over the Firth of Forth. And it is the most insanely, I think it's one of the most insanely over-engineered structures in the world. The thing is like 4 times stronger than it needs to be. There's a whole story about why they built that bridge that way. And if you watch Bridge on the River Kwai, they built it on this pattern with these diamond cantilevers, the wooden bridge in Burma. And anyway, there's a whole story behind it. I won't go into it, but you have to be a total bridge nerd to appreciate it. But I saw that double diamond thing, and I immediately thought of the Forth Bridge, and that's how I remember it.
Expansion dimensions.
Little connections. And you might not, maybe that will triple trigger, and you'll now remember something that you might not have otherwise. So how do you expand? What do you do? The whole idea of expansion involves the idea of dimension and space and time. So we live in 3 dimensions: length, width, depth, time. But you can expand in a lot of different dimensions. So maybe you've got your scope, you've got your charter or your pre-charter. We're doing a project PDD, project definition document, something like that. We're trying out a new pre-charter, which is super helpful for BAs, a way to describe a really rough concept that isn't ready for a charter. But you can take that thing and you can say, okay, who's involved? We can make that, expand that circle bigger. Who needs to be involved? Who do they know? And you're trying to make it bigger. You're deliberately trying to make it bigger because you want to get a nice sense of context and learn interesting things. Who's talking to who? Can we change the relationships? Well, these little people, this group of people are always talking to one another. These over here are always talking. Let's mix them. What happens if they start talking to them? They've never done that. Well, let them do that. See what comes out. We can change the mode. If we've heard a lot today about sort of the emotional side of it, and this is super important. I'll get to this in a minute about how people communicate and how we learn. Don't just always run the meeting where you've got a group of 8 people talking. Stop for 10 minutes and let them write. I didn't just think and write. The introverts lit up yesterday. I did this yesterday and we got great output. So that's another way to expand. We're going to expand how we meet, how we interact. And you don't stay expanded. You usually focus down again, but you expand for a time to give it room to grow. We've already seen how you can change altitude. You can ask why to go up. You have to be a little careful with why because it can sound accusatory. So a lot of times it's like, well, okay, retrace the steps. Help me understand how are things going to be better if we're successful at this? What's really going to change? How does this kind of help the mission of the university? But without being, sometimes it can sound accusatory, but keep it curious. If you have the mind to yourself that there's really no right answer here, I just really want to know. I'm like the 2-year-old, right? The 2-year-old asking why. I just want to know. Or maybe I just want you to keep talking. I think that's something about 2-year-olds. My daughter, when she was little, I don't think she really knew that she was asking why. I think that what she learned is that when she asked why, she got more input. And what she really was saying was, tell me more. And sometimes I use, tell me more. That's interesting. Tell me more. And sometimes as people get more comfortable, then the backstory gets out and you find out, well, I really don't know why we're doing this project either. Somebody said we were doing it and they said I was assigned to it. Okay. Curious question. Perspective shifts. Sometimes you give people a blank sheet of paper. Sometimes you seed it with a draft document. Sometimes you ask questions. Sometimes you put out assertions and you know some of them are wrong. And they're going to look at the assertions and they're going to say, well, that's not right. And then they're engaged in helping you fix it. Some people freeze up when they see a blank sheet of paper. I feel like I'm in a straitjacket when somebody gives me oh, it's already 3/4 figured it out, just fill in the details. And I go, and I ask why and blow everything up.
Focused expansion. A bridge between 2 cylinders.
Then you can do a focused expansion. The worst thing I think that a BA can do, the biggest mistake we can make, is a big gap. A big gap in stakeholders, a big gap where there's a data flow in there or a process we missed in integration. So you cultivate an ability to see what's not there. And a lot of times people have done this early focus and they focused on the symptom, they focused on the problem or even the root causes that they understand it. And they want to keep the scope small because they're trying to get it funded and they're trying to get it done. So they're trying to keep the scope small. And there's this thing over here, which they've declared out of scope, but it's really not. And the way I was first taught this was doing e-commerce in the 90s. And they said, to really understand this, we're building a system that takes orders, right? Takes sales orders. But if you really want to understand and make sure we're doing this right, staple yourself to an order. That was the metaphor that my mentor said. From the lifetime, from the person places that order, it goes through, it gets picked, packed, and shipped. They receive it, they don't like it, they get refunded for part of it, and they return the merchandise, and you've got a happy customer. Run it clear through to the end. And now all of a sudden, they were saying, you don't have to worry about fulfillment. That's fulfillment's job, right? You're e-commerce. Well, wait a minute. People are going to buy this stuff, and there's a whole process, and we're not going to have a happy customer unless the whole process works. Does any of that stuff need to come forward? And a lot of times, there's scope creep or growth because there's a funded project and everybody starts filing on because it's got funding. And that's one kind of scope growth. But this isn't really scope creep, what I'm talking about. This is scope discovery. It got missed because people kind of didn't want to look over there. They didn't know how to look at the blank space. And now the thing is growing, and it has to. That was logically part of the project all along, and we didn't see it. So what these expansion techniques, these focused expansion techniques are designed to do is help you find that. So again, you'd mix them up. Follow the life cycle of the data. Where do the data come from? Who's the data steward on these data? Who else uses them? Is there reporting? Oh yeah, there's that report okay. And that stuff may not be in scope. You may contract back down and say, no, we're actually not working about reporting. They got it covered over there. But it's not just out there like a blank space that you didn't even bother to look. So expand, contract. Some of the best BA training I had was ProSci organizational change management training. And that gives you looking not just at the future state, but the journey that all of the individuals are going to go through to get there. And we've since actually dialed back and accepted a much less ideal future state because the change journey to get there was so much better. and was going to be so much less disruptive and so much more complete. So you start building this, again, human experience, not just experience using the system, but experience of changing from what they're doing now to using the system. And how is that going to affect what goes in their annual review? How is that going to affect the people they interact with on a daily basis? Are they going to have to learn the new system? Are they going to have to learn new business processes around the new system? How's all that change going to go down? And that becomes part of the whole package. And you don't necessarily see that if you don't change your perspective from centering the system to centering an individual and thinking of their journey over time. So you kind of like the BA life as you learn to think in multiple dimensions. And you can start small. It's just asking a couple of simple questions. It's really it looks like magic, but once you've kind of got the idea, oh, it's just a perspective shift, or I'm going up in abstraction, or I'm going back in time, I can do that with questions in my own mind. It's not so bad. And again, it seems like magic.
WizCard replacement.
So here's a fun one. I'm on this one now. We're replacing the WizCard. And technically, replacing the WizCard is, we're increasing the security. It's going to run on tap-to-pay type radio, so it's a lot more secure than the procs that we have now. So of course, the vendor was all get us on the new technology. And this, oh, by the way, you're going to have to make the campus ready to accept all these new cards, out of scope for them. And oh, you're not just going to do phones, you're going to do plastic too. Yeah, well, we don't do plastic. That's out of scope. It may be out of scope for you, but it's in scope for us. The campus has got to be ready to use these, or what good does it do? And we have to have a plastic card because we don't want to force people to use smartphones. So there was an expansion. And then when the budget trouble came along, just how many of these readers are we going to have to replace? Not the doors, those have already been done, but the ones and twos where they're using readers for exam proctoring and student event attendance. How many of them are there? And when people are going to come up with these readers and we want to know, we don't want to have an open tab, we want to know what the budget's going to be. So all of a sudden we had to really expand and essentially turn it into crowdsourcing. We realized there was no way we can turn over every rock in every school and college and find all these readers. We have to get people looking for us. So you are now enlisted in the WizCard find. If you see a reader, tell somebody. Most of them we already know about, but every now and then I just tipped over 17 in the school business, and even though we talked to the school business 3 times and asked them explicitly, do you have any other places in your organization where you use WizCard? And they said, no, we got them all. Anybody who ever knows says, could you find me all of the whatever at University of Wisconsin? You just start laughing. There's always another one. So we're not going to find all the readers, but we're going to get most of them so that the vice chancellor doesn't have an open tab and people surfacing with readers. Nobody's fault. That's the other thing you learn really quick, and this comes, I think, from the social work perspective, is that everybody's doing the best they can. Sometimes the system is messed up, and they're working in a flawed system, and it's really hard, but they're doing most of the time, they're doing the best they can. And so it wasn't like the people in the school business were holding out on us about keeping readers a secret. It just didn't, the thoughts didn't connect, or those weren't the people that knew. And then somebody else found out from a rumor or communication we did, and we've tried everything, but it connected, and we found the extra readers.
Writers, elephants, and maps metaphor.
So I mentioned map making. And there's also this view of humans. Another thing that some people here can attest to this. Whenever anybody refers to resources, and they clearly mean people, I pitch a minor fit. I think it's disrespectful. But more than that, I can handle the disrespect, but more than that, it presents a model of humans that is just wrong. Because the resource model is the idea, here they are, they work 40 hours a week, give or take, they have a sack of skills, we can build up a little tower of them, and we've got all the skills filled and we're fine. And oh, I need extra resources over here, I can pop them out and stick them in over here, and it all obeys algebra. Doesn't work that way. Just like the chevrons don't work that way, and it's a really nice high-level model, but it doesn't really work that way. People don't work that way. Daniel Kahneman, the economist, actually won a Nobel Prize for he wasn't an economist, he was a behavioral psychologist. He won a Nobel Prize in like 1979 for demonstrating that the way that rational people behaved in all of the economic models, that real people really don't behave that way. And he had a bunch of evidence to show that people make decisions that aren't like optimal all the time, and they do it in predictable ways. So he dubbed the economic model people econs. He says they're not humans, they're econs. And if the world is populated by econs, then it'll work. If it's populated by humans, then you're going to get these other results where people have loss aversion and other things that they do. Another social scientist, a man named John Haidt, formed this model, which I've really found sticks. You try these models out, you see what helps people. He says we're all riders on elephants. And we're not, our mental, the part that we think is really us, our thinking part is the rider. And we can do a lot. We can do all kinds of general stuff. But as far as the power, the force of moving us along, and what really does the work and bears the load, it's the elephant. And we can clear paths for our elephants. We can get them scared. We can calm them down. But if the elephant's having a bad day, you're having a bad day. And some of that mental and emotional things that the first speaker was talking about was really about elephant calming, is how I would use it in this metaphor. I had to learn this stuff in self-defense because I think I had my first panic attack when I was 3, and I was diagnosed in 1984, and I have generalized anxiety disorder, and sometimes just keeping my brains inside of my head is a problem. So I have a serious elephant management problem. So I really had to learn this stuff. A lot of the techniques that he was talking about, like taking the pause and everything, they just train you on that stuff. So anybody that's been through any kind of a therapy knows all about that. So but the world of the BA is you're going out there and you're interacting with riders on elephants in a big complicated social system. And the thing that makes it really interesting is that all of the elephant riders, and the elephants too, have maps in their heads. I mean, the elephant knows the route of the routes that it's traveled before. You could practically go to sleep. My mom used to talk about the horse that delivered milk in her town. And the driver didn't even have to be with the horse. The horse would walk to the next house and stop, and he'd go get the milk. And by the time he came back with the empties, the horse had moved to the next house. So the horse had a map. The elephant has a map. We have maps in our head. And the interesting thing in project world, something as complicated as an IT project at UW-Madison, is everybody's got their own map. The maps are all wrong. None of them quite match the terrain. They're wrong to varying degrees, and none of the maps line up. So people start acting according to their map, doing what makes perfect sense, and all of a sudden they're banging into other people, or they're going off in odd directions. And my job as a BA is sometimes to do exploration and find out what the accurate map really is, if it's uncharted territory, or just go around helping people fix maps. And people really don't like it when you tell them their map is wrong. So that's where the social work comes in. You got to help them kind of find their way along to getting a better map.
Slide. Structured plain language.
I only have 2 little techniques for map making. 30 years ago, it was all the rage. We had unified modeling language and a bunch of stuff that was going to make us have very precise definitions of information systems, no more unintelligible requirements. And it didn't work because any modeling language that's accurate enough to represent the details of the system, you need to be fairly technical and spend a lot of time to understand it. So what we've fallen back to is structured plain language, user stories, tests written and given when then, something that a person who uses the system isn't technical at all can give you the logical explanation of who does this, what are they trying to do, and why do they want to do that. So it's got your levels in, the who, what, and why. Or it's a test. Given this condition, when this happens, then this should happen. And you can describe a lot of things that way, and you can hand the words back to people, and they can say, yeah, that's right, or no. You can hand somebody I made a beautiful sequence diagram a couple of years ago and gave it to somebody, and everybody said it looks good. I don't think they looked at it or understood it. But they didn't want to admit they didn't understand it, so they just said, yeah, it looks fine. And that's what we're trying to avoid, because you can't help people with their maps that way.
Context diagram.
Here's another one we use all the time. It's really simple. This one's kind of done in a tool, so it looks fancy. But anybody could do this. Draw the system you're talking about, or whatever it is you're talking about, in the middle. And then just around it, who are all the people that know about this thing or care about this thing in any way? And just draw them all. That's the context in the context diagram. Next to them, what do they care about? Why do they care? How are they involved? And you can get as detailed as like, or it can just be names and roles, or names of people. And you can do the same thing with the data. There's some source systems feel like Big Fix and HR. You can say, okay, does this system talk to any other systems? What are they? What does it get from those systems? What does it send back? Just nouns and verbs is all you need. And the thing is now you've got a map-making language. You sort of got a trade language. If you're familiar with cultures would arise, before globalization, we have our own local language that we speak, but when we go to the next valley over or the next 2 valleys over, we have a trade language that we both know. It's not our heart language. It's not But when it comes to conversing to people over there, it's what we use, and we all understand it. So these are the equivalent of kind of like a trade language for talking about information systems. What do we want it to do? Where does it get its information? Who does that? Who else cares about this? How are these things connected? And then once you have this breadth, you can then focus in these maps, you can then focus in on a particular piece and say, well, we can implement this piece with confidence that we know what else it's hooked to. We're not just trying to do something in the middle and then realize it's got all these side effects.
Slide. Deep listening. Image. A large red bridge.
I put this in because this is sort of like these three up and to the left, expand and contract, and emergence are kind of like the verses. This is like the bridge, and that's why I put the bridge in. I won't get into this very much, but I will show you this one slide because it's an indication of what the problem is really like. Somewhere when like 1 or 2, much to the dismay of our parents, we learn to talk. And the rest of our education then, they're teaching us how to talk better, how to express ourselves better, how to give presentations. And they really, the effect of how do our words sound to a disinterested observer who's giving us a grade is very, very important. They never, other than being able to read the questions on the exam, I don't think unless you're in some field where it really calls for it, they never really teach you how to listen. And when I became a volunteer doing emotional and spiritual caregiving, we had 50 hours of training. About a third of it was sort of the first talk. It was getting our own self out of the mix so that we could actually hear what another person is saying. About a third of it had to do with the kinds of stressful conditions that people would come into it. The remaining third was on listening. And we practiced and we practiced and we practiced. And you start realizing just how hard it is to really hear what another person is saying. Because there's all this stuff in the way. Remember, elephants' maps. I've got a map. My map doesn't match their map. I come into a conversation. I'll think, oh my gosh, good, they got a map. This is going to go great. And the other person is coming in thinking, I hope this doesn't take long. So we're in different places with different maps. I have something I want. It gets filtered through my feelings about the whole situation. I turn it into words. The words come out. The words are accompanied by body language. They see and experience that. They hear the words. They translate the words according to the meaning that that word means. So I say accountability, I mean one thing, and they hear accountability and they get another. They plat that down through their feelings in their map and it lands. Oh, I'm glad we talked. I'm glad we agree. We have no way of knowing. Every time I'm in a meeting and everybody's just talking and everybody's taking notes and nobody's sharing their notes, I know what I heard, but it's probably not what they heard. And unless we have a way of truing it up, we haven't really communicated. So, because so much of this stuff, it's not deep BA secrets. It's just listening and getting feedback.
Feedback.
Feedback is another word we use all the time. It's really a multi-step process. I can give feedback, but if you don't receive it, there's no value. Matter of fact, if it hurts the relationship, it's worse than no value. I make things worse. What I really want is I want to be able to connect with a person, share something, confirm that some things are true. This is where I'm getting feedback from myself, get correction on the other things. And then I go adjust my map a little bit. Now our maps line up. People don't work on this. So I don't know where I heard these two statements. Actually, I do remember the second one. A guy hit me right between the eyes with it about 3 years ago. Would you rather be right, Robert? Would you rather be effective? But it shouldn't be this way. This isn't right. Robert, would you rather be right or effective? Your choice. And likewise, if you think that your map of reality and your communication skills are really good, and that the best way to maximize the value that you bring is to make sure you just like do, and that effort's going to equal results, you're probably right. Because your communication skills, you're never going to find out that they're not working, and you're never going to find out that your map is off. And, you know, it'll probably work. It's worked well enough. And that's the other thing, that's the social work view. All of us are doing the best we can. And here I am, I'm about to retire. I've been gainfully employed all my life, and, you know, I did okay. But I also look back and, oh my gosh, I couldn't get out of my own way and had all these things that I just didn't really understand.
Emergence.
Emergence. This is more of a principle. You know, we have metaphors for organizations. And I think Western organizations tend to think of themselves as big machines and the big powerful machine. Toyota's metaphor for the Toyota Motor Corporation was a tree. You grow a healthy tree, it bears good fruit. We can't make a tree bear good fruit. We can take care of the soil and keep the pests off of it, and we can tend it, and if you keep it healthy, the fruit will come. Well, you can't manage what you can't measure. Well, maybe what we really want is stuff that's hard to measure. Does that mean we just like don't think about it at all and we just follow the checklist and hope for the best? No, the orchardists are looking at the fruit, but they know directly that they can't go shake the tree and tell it to bear more fruit. It just doesn't work that way. They can keep it healthy, and then it will. And my focus, particularly when the world is changing fast, is always on principles. What's not changing? What's a few simple things that aren't changing? And they'll tell me, I can then put those, okay, what's the principle that works here? What is it about productivity or value creation or flow of work through an organization that just, it always works this way, regardless of the technology. It's just how humans are and how logic works. In this context, what does that look like? And help people grow their own. So you can use this emergence principle for a lot of different things. And here's some of my favorites that I do.
Uses of emergence.
Defining categories. It's really easy to say, well, I'm the expert, I'll define the categories, and then we'll either tell the workers what the categories are, or we'll do it ourselves. We'll just categorize all the things. And then we'll say, okay, these are the categories and these are the rules for the categories. And it never quite fit right. It's like a bad fitting clothes. Because we had the categories before we started looking at the data. So immediately, it's like that ladder again. We interpret the data according to the categories we've already got fixed in our mind. We're looking at the map, the data, we're looking at the terrain in terms of our map and saying, well, it has to fit on here somewhere, rather than saying, well, maybe our categories are wrong. So the way to use emergence to make categories, and you can get facilitation guides for this, it's easy to find. Liberating structures is one of them that I use a lot. Luma design is, you got to pay for it, but liberating structures are all free. You can go out liberatingstructures.com, I think it's a .com, and you'll find these. Get a bunch of examples, 50 or 60 examples. Right now we're working through network changes, right, and categorizing them. Take 50 or 60 examples, lay them out on a table, put them in clusters. Just let people, whatever. I'm not asking you to even have any logic for how you cluster them. Just say, well, these are like these are like these are like these are like these. And then you look at the clusters and you talk about it and you go, well, these are really kind of the same thing. We could put those together. There's really like two different kinds over here. Now that I think about it, we can split those apart. And you come up with natural groupings. And then you look at why did we group them that way? And you apply a little logic. It isn't that there's no logic. It's just that you don't lead with logic. Because if you lead with logic, you bake your own logic complete with the flawed assumptions right into the answer. You don't even see it. It's got to hold up to logical scrutiny, but the logic is more like a test than a way you get there. You don't think your way. Somebody once said you can't think your way out of a problem that you didn't think your way into. So yeah, you know. And then you name the categories, or you understand why did we pick these, and then maybe you true them up a little bit. So defining categories works that way. I remember using this. I had to have templates to do a certain work product. I did one of them custom, did the second one custom, did the third one custom by cutting and pasting. And then after I'd done like 5 or 6 and I had something I liked, lay them all side by side. Oh, this is basically the same. I can just use that paragraph in every proposal. This is a little bit different, but it's really in 2 flavors depending upon what the customer needs. This is different every time. We'll have to write it custom. But the people who did the work made the template, not somebody else made the template and said, here, fill out the form. And you grow it. And you can count on emergence. It will work. You just have to give it a chance.
Slide, Web Analytics and HIPAA.
Oh, this is a fun story. This sort of ties it all together. I was brought into a project and they said, we need you to gather requirements for a web analytics solution for youth in our healthcare component because we have HIPAA. We have the risk of HIPAA violations. Our BA, we are sending personal health information to Google through our web analytics, and Google does not enter into business associate agreements. So this is a HIPAA violation. Google won't sign a BAA. If they would, an associate agreement. If they would, then we'd be fine. So what we need to do is we need to find a vendor, an analytics vendor that will sign a BAA. Go gather requirements, from the people who are doing web analytics so that we can pick a new tool. Wait. Up and to the left. What's the real problem? Well, we need, Google Analytics isn't HIPAA compliant. They won't sign a BAA. Now, why is that a problem? Because we're sending them PHI. Why are we sending them PHI? Well, we think it's we think, okay, what's really going on? Is it really PHI? Well, somebody in California got sued. Okay, what did they get sued for? And you started unwinding this thing and you figured out, yeah, BAA would solve it. A new vendor would solve it. But a new vendor is also going to be a huge change management journey. We have to go around to all the web marketing people and tell them you can't use Google Analytics anymore. You have to use this commercial solution that we're going to have to buy. We'll probably have to go to RFP. And we got to do a big change thing. What if we could make Google, what we're doing, not make PHI? And it kind of took a while, but we did the expand and we started saying, well, there's the vendor solution. We got that thread going. We started researching vendors and doing requirements. But we also started talking to people about how exactly do you use these analytics? And if you dial back on the personal information a little bit, would it drop below the threshold? And we finally ended up, we didn't come up with it. The people, I worked with somebody in compliance on this, the people in distributed IT and their digital marketing people came up with the idea. Well, if we just turn off these 3 switches in Google Analytics, then we're no longer making PHI, we think we're fine. So we ran that by compliance people and they said, yeah, we're probably fine. We are just about ready to start rolling this out at scale. And again, nobody will ever know that there was no RFP. We solved the problem. There was no RFP. There was no purchase decision. There was no project. We had a project manager and they were going, wait, what? When does the project start? It never did. It didn't have to in terms of an implementation. But in terms of a project, there was definitely a project. And we got there. And then the way things go, we were about ready to start rolling out the configuration changes when Office of Civil Rights vacated the guidance. And I've since learned that vacating the guidance was like, oops, never mind. So not a problem. I'm sure glad we didn't buy a new analytics tool. But that was a case of the whole BA life cycle. So up and to the left, expand, contract, just do the thing.
Slide. Reverse Q&A.
And I think I'm just going to stop because we got time for a nice talk and see what people want to talk about. I've got a couple of questions here. I love the idea of reverse Q&A. What happens if I get to ask you questions? I've actually seen that done with a panel. And so I can throw these out. And then, certainly you're welcome to ask me questions. We've got time. And we will kind of leave it. So just pause. That was a lie through. This is something I've done. I took this test. Here, I'll talk a little bit more. I took a test in the summer of 2022 from a woman named Liz Wiseman in a book named Multipliers. And it said, Robert, I scored like 36 out of 50. You are an accidental diminisher. You bring people down. And I was like brokenhearted because that's not who I want to be. It's not who I am. But the net effect, and what they basically, you're too much. Somebody asks you for something and you give them 14 options. They ask you for review on a paper they wrote, and it comes back with all sorts of really great suggestions to make it better, but the thing just looks like it's been shot full of holes. You're just too much. I'm still too much. I was just too much today. It's probably an appropriate place to be a little bit extra, but my daughter and I, she's also kind of like me, and we say, don't ever dumb it down, but you might want to dial it back. That's what we tell one another. So anyway, I've done it again. Where have you seen solutions emerge as opposed to being planned or driven? That driven word always makes me cringe too. Is it drive with a whip or is it drive with a wheel? I don't like being driven with a whip. Where might you try up and to the left? Where might you try expand and contract? And then anything you want to ask me.
Hi, Robert. Thank you. That was,
Yeah.
I love metaphors. I don't know if you're a fan of George Lakoff, but if you haven't read him,
should be.
Some Things to Read in Retirement, Don't Think of an Elephant's one of his political ones, and then The Philosophy in the Flesh is my favorite. I was wondering if there are examples of situations where people don't agree on the principles and what happens with emergence if that's true.
It doesn't work very well. And the principles are kind of ingrained into people's maps. And a lot of times we never really talk about them, and we don't really have a way to structure the conversation. And sometimes it's that a lot of people, they really kind of aren't principle people. And one of the things that I've had to learn about myself is that I have a really strong mind. A lot of times that's actually not an asset because it makes it hard to communicate and too much. But I think in principles and emergence. Other people don't. So how do you lead people along? How do you help them see it? How do you get them engaged with learning a little bit about the principles? I mean, a debate that's running in software circles to this day is sort of, or in IT circles, is sort of like the old agile versus waterfall. And they both have their advocates, they both have their places, in my opinion. But very few people do I ever run into who understand why they work or why they don't. I've ever really thought about that. Why is it? Because, well, it worked over here. Well, it worked over here. What's the fundamental difference? And a lot of times, well, I don't like this, right? So yeah, you have a real problem. When you're in an organization that isn't clear on its operating and principles, this is sort of like the underlying laws of physics. It's not really moral principles. It's still like, this is just how it really works. Emergence, stuff emerges. If you think of disturbed land, you get bushes and you get raspberries and you get, the occasional small tree, but you're not going to get an orchard because it's just not the right conditions for that. The soil's kind of weird, and we planted all sorts of different principles in there, and they're all growing, and people are arguing about the lack of fruit, and we're just all kind of stuck. Remember, if you had a fruit tree and you'd never seen a fruit tree before, and you just saw all this wood, and all the work is being done by these few little twigs, that's where the fruit is. What we really need is just don't give me all the wood and roots and junk. That's waste. We just need fruit. They've never seen a real tree, so how would they know? You don't blame them. How would they know? So yeah, we really have a problem. And a lot of times people don't know how to have the principle conversation. I don't know why that is. I don't know. I honestly don't know. A lot of times there's not an appetite for it. We're too busy. We got a lot to get done. We don't need to worry how the clutch pedal and the gear, whatever, we'll just drive, step on the gas. So we're in first gear. We never learned how to shift because we would have had to slow down to shift, and look at how far behind we are already. So can't do that. Makes me sad. But that's Earth.
Thank you, Robert. Really enjoyed the talk.
Thanks.
One of the things that Lois said she was very, very proud of here during her tenure was the way that campus pulled together to deal with the shock of COVID. And the example she gave was how so many disparate colleges, departments, and divisions got together to round up laptops. I was not involved in that aspect of it, but maybe there are people here who were. But I'm thinking that was probably a wonderful example of emergence. Is there anyone here who can comment on that? Starting with you, Robert.
I was not involved in that effort at all. I knew what was going on. And yeah, it was basically there's people that know how to do and know what they're doing, stay out of their way. Okay.
I got the impression from Lois that people knew coming in, this previous person, I don't know your name in the red here. Yes, you talked about principles. I gather from Sarah that these people with that laptop endeavor did agree on the principles. We knew what our challenge was. Any comments, Robert?
Anything from anybody else about the pivot to COVID, which I watched again from a distance, because I had ongoing projects that were still going, but I watched the operational challenge. And I had my perspectives, but I'm interested in hearing other ones.
I don't think I've ever worked so hard.
Yeah.
It was all hands on deck. It was finding any resource you could.
Mm-hmm.
It was all hands on deck. It was a tremendous lift. It was a serious collaboration. I came from the med school, and there was very disparate departments at the time. that ended up coming together to work through challenges. It was certainly an interesting time, and it was a real shift in mindset as well, from being in the office to working from home.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I heard, and one of the things I've learned from learning about Mr. Deming and Lean, was the idea of what they call a work in process limit. In other words, how many different things do you have going on at once? And when you reduce the work in process limit, you get faster flow. There's just only one thing to do. And yeah, people may be sitting idle waiting for something else, but as soon as something comes into their area, they're handling it. And there's no waiting. And I think what I saw is very clear sense of why all of a sudden, and what and why. And so whatever the departmental initiatives for the year, they're out the window. We got one thing we have to do. We have to figure out how to take the whole campus online. And it was sort of, I mean, if you've seen the movie Apollo 13, which I think about everybody has, where they have that very memorable scene where they dump all that stuff that's on the spacecraft with the failed electrical system. We have 48 hours to figure out how to take that and get one of these filters, the round one, to fit into the square hole. So the problem is really clear. Nobody's arguing about that. It's just obvious what it is. And it's really clear, so it's relentlessly focused. And then they probably had expansive thinking about the problem solving. And I was really kind of wondering, how did they decide to orchestrate, or how did the people come together to organize that laptop collection or the distribution or all of the courses that had to get online materials? I mean, it was just phenomenal. It was to see from a distance. It was like, wow. So there must have been a lot of creativity. So there were some other things. I was a fair amount of sacred cow tipping, I'm just guessing. Stuff that really mattered in February 2020 just all of a sudden didn't really seem all that important anymore. And now it's probably come back, but at the time it's like, we got one job, right? And that's what we're going to do. And a lot of times people go through those experiences and they have good memories, even if it was just like insanely hard work, because we knew what we were trying to do, and that's energizing. I mean, the elephant is leaning and pulling. You're not having to coax it anymore. We know what we're trying to do. We're focused on it. Somebody comes up with a better idea. We honor that. Nobody's pulling rank. We're just all trying to solve the problem. And that's usually, I think, in my experience, is how transformation happens. There's a system that's running along that's good enough, and then it faces an existential threat. And then in the existential threat, they're willing to dig all the way down to the bare metal and the underlying principles of what are we really trying to do here, and what really makes this thing go. But without the existential threat, people just don't want to dig that deep. It's not that comfortable. It can upset all sorts of history and power and culture and a bunch of stuff that means a lot to people. And I'm not saying it shouldn't mean a lot to people. It's just like you can't arbitrarily make that stuff go away. You can't really simulate an existential threat. When it comes, I think it's very clarifying. And I think that's a lot of times why disasters a lot of times pull communities together. Just shakes them. Don't know. And of course, people that can figure out how to simulate that in a way that the organization can handle and affect that kind of principled change, they're very, very good leaders, and they're rare. And the status quo probably tries to get rid of them.
Yeah, we've got a question online.
Oh, great.
Good.
Okay.
We can't run in crisis mode for very long. That's the other thing. You're trashing the engines.
All right. Vanessa Talby asks, do you think the lens of do interrupts the why? I like design systems and how principles help ground us in the why and recognize our value delivery. I feel to create one, you have to something similar to what you described. Try some things and see what is in common behind what you do, then approach principles.
Could you read that again, please? Sure. There's a lot in there.
So,
Yes, that's
yeah, so
a
I
lot
think,
in there.
yeah. Do you think the lens of do interrupts the why? I like design systems and how principles ground us in the why and recognize our value delivery. I also feel to create one, you have to have something similar to what you described. Try some things and see what is in the common behind what you do, then approach the principles.
I think it's that ability to move organizationally as a team. And again, not everybody's doing it, but the group is doing it. of moving up and then back. So you do some do, because that's going to inform your understanding, and then you back up and you say, okay, what's really going on here? Let's tweak it. And we're going to go back down and do some more. All too often, I think we start at one end. I just missed an opportunity there. I could have said, we'll say it, all too well. I know it all too well. We usually start at the beginning and we figure out the why, and then we do. And we never take the results of do and go back and revisit why. And instead, I think it's just the loop. You go up, you go back down. You go up, you go back down. That was a principle of lean that Deming taught. Go to the shop floor. They know what's going on. You know, go look. And then let the doers get involved in the strategy a little bit. Tell them what you're trying to accomplish and let them help you figure out how to do that. Where we're trying to increase, you know, accepted applications by X%. Tell people who don't know anything about college applications and admission rates, tell them what you're trying to do. They may have some fantastic ideas of how to use technology that you didn't know to ask. That's another case of expand, change who's talking to who, and just mix it up. And that a lot of times will unleash emergence. And that's why I said emergence isn't really something that it isn't really a move you can make, but you create the conditions under which it'll happen. Healthy things grow. So how can we make this healthy? So I think, yeah, you got to let the do can blind you, because you get into the day-to-day, and we've all done it. You know, you just got your head down, you're pedaling hard, you're doing the thing. And it's hard to step back up on that. One leadership writer says, get up on the balcony and watch the dance for a minute. You're going to get back in the dance, but you're going to get out of it. Mindfulness is like that. It's saying, I'm going to stop and I'm going to kind of observe myself. I'm feeling these tingling in my arms. I'm not, it's just made up. But my breathing is a certain way, and I'm thirsty because I've been talking. And okay, now I'm going to go back to, with the pause. I mean, the pause, he talked, that's so huge. That's huge. Organizations need those too. They pauses. And get the right different mix of people or whatever. I don't know. It's hard. If it were easy, we'd figured it out, moved on.
I think one of the challenges for the IT community on campus is the push to consolidate IT throughout campus. And I've heard of examples where it's done really badly, where the IT people are quitting and being, you know, really unhappy, and even the end users are unhappy with the changes. But I've also seen where it's gone better at times. And I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts about how some consolidations that have gone well and some that have not?
No. I mean, there are certainly people who have been through these. They've led them. They've been through them. That's not me. I don't have any direct experience. Whenever I don't have any direct experience, I fall back on some really basic principles and try to invent something. And in this case, I've not been involved in the event, and so I don't know. We're going to try something. But that's, I think, is a case where principles really help. Because what are we trying to do? It's the why again. Why are we want to consolidate? What does consolidation mean? There's a lean saying, ask why 5 times. And it basically means ask why until you hit the thing where everybody goes, well, yeah, that's just kind of obvious. Well, and then even about money. I mean, there's different kinds of money. You know, and money, what do we really mean by money? There's dollars that we write checks, and then there's this idea of like effort or resources or capacity or whatever. Do we really understand what we're talking about? And not to dwell there forever, we're not trying to write a philosophical treatise about resources or capacity, but get enough of a glimpse of what I like to say are the underlying physics that we can then go back and do for a while, and we can see if reality is matching our new map. Because if it's not, we need to fix our map. So a lot of times people come in with I've seen this in business. That's where I saw it more, because I did business consulting for a while. And people would do consolidations or outsourcing, and you got the impression that they were doing this because some other company did it and they got great results. And what they were sort of doing is they were messing with the branches and the fruit, and they never really understood, well, why did outsourcing work so well for that company? And here it was a consolidation or centralization, and here it was a total disaster. Do we even understand why it worked over there and why it didn't over there? And is there any way we can try it out on the small and like grow our own a little bit? Or do we have to come up with a big thing that we do everywhere for the first time? I don't know. So I always fall back on, how do we honor the people? Do we really know what we're trying to do? Is there any way we can like iterate and take small steps before we try to scale it? And this isn't me. I read this from Jim Collins and Good to Great. It's a bunch of business books. You know, again, I'm glad it's not my responsibility to figure it out.
All right, with that, we are at time. So thank you everyone for participating today. Thank you, Robert, for your presentation. And